Well, I got a video for some of you. I'm sure you guys are all curious about this particular video. Well, the title pretty much says what it is. Can you make money early in this game? And the short answer of the matter is yes, you can. And I'm going to explain how you can make money. Now, I want to make a note that you're not going to be making a lot of money anyway when you first start out. So I just want to set the record straight on that. However, there is ways you can make some money early in the game without killing people, in a sense. Okay, now if you those of you that happen to be following me, or if you're listening, whether you go about the dark side way or you're not about the dark side way, okay. If you're the type that you don't really like to do any kind of dark stuff in the game, you just want to have a light playthrough and that sort of thing. Okay, yes, there is a way to do it. Now, you could choose any class that you want to play as. This has nothing to do, this is not a guide or anything like that. However, I would encourage you to play as either a female scout or a male scout. There is a reason why I would say choose one of each. I will explain here why in a second. Because to make a little bit of some money early, there is a way to do it. And now I'm going to demonstrate in-game to give you guys a couple examples of what you can do and how you can go about certain things like that. I will say this much, however, you do kind of make it a little bit harder on yourself, if you don't at least do some kind of dark stuff. But in case you happen to be watching, whether you are doing light or you're doing dark, I will at least give some pointers. Yes, I'm sure a lot of you already know about doing the bounties and things like that. That's usually the way that some people think that if you don't do any of the bounties, you don't really get a lot of money. Okay, so if you don't intend on doing Bednick Star Killer, because he is a dark side option if you go to the battle arena, I still think he's worth it just because you get a free gun out of him. You don't have to worry about buying it, you know. But if you prefer to, if you're the type that would rather buy the Arcanian pistol, which is some people would say is the second best gun after, Bendix gun or even cards, for example, it just depends on how you look at it. But a lot of people usually, by the time they get to the Undercity, they usually don't have a lot of money to kind of spare to get it a lot of times because since you have to deal with a lot of raccoons down there, they tend to poison you quite often, right? So most people end up, buying a couple of, what do you want to call it, antidotes in case if you get infected. And it happens quite often when you get down there. Okay, so to make a short answer on this, the reason why I mentioned about a scout, so let's go outside of our apartment because I just want to give you just kind of a demonstration what we have here. Since Karth is the only person you have when you start out early on. Well, you get a vendor just right down here. This is the first place you can come to. Now, I want you to notice the first thing that I did before I talked to this guy. I want you to notice that I took something off that I originally had on. This is a cardio package. This is an implant. This is something that's only possible if you play as a scout. You get these for free at level 1. Now, it's only if you play as a scout. If you pick a different class, for example, as a soldier or a scoundrel, this still will not show up for them. You still have to purchase them, which is kind of interesting how it works like that. Even though you can select implants for other classes, but only the scout gets them for free, at least at the start anyway. Okay, so the reason why I took it off is because I'm going to demonstrate here in a couple of minutes. When I got off, by the time I got to this particular place, this is the credits that I kind of I ended up getting by the time I got off of the Endar Spire, whatever you want to call it, before it blows. Now, it's usually a little bit random depending on how much credits you get. Usually, you don't really get a whole lot. I would say, try to go through a couple times, see if you get at least around like 50 credits or something. And then, when you finally get a chance, after this guy talks to you, go into his store. Okay, because there's a reason why since he's the first guy you come to, okay, I want to mention about computer spikes before I get to my other thing. Right now, you Now, I'm not saying you have to sell all these. You don't have to do that. But right now, each computer spike will give you at least 100 credits apiece by itself. Okay. Now, these won't have nearly the same amount of value later on. So if you want to make some money, okay, I would suggest at least selling two of them. Since I didn't use the computer spikes back on the Endar Spire, I decided to use the parts to get the robot to move instead. That allowed me to basically sell a couple. Now, the reason why I would say you don't want to sell all these is because when you get down to the Undercity, you are going to need some computer spikes to basically disable a couple of turrets down there when you ultimately go down to the Undercity and that sort of thing. So you are going to need them eventually. But early on, right now, at this particular stage of the game, when you're up on when you're up on the upper city, and then when you get to the lower city, for example, you'll be just fine for the time being. So if you want to make somebody like this is one way you can kind of do it. Another thing, another thing is depending on what you picked up back on the end Spire, since I also have a couple of other different weapons, I could also sell these to them if I so desire. This will give you some money, maybe not a whole lot, but it'll give you at least something. Unfortunately, the long sword and the two little short swords, that you kind of find out there, you don't really get much for it, but I usually tend to sell them anyway. And unless if you're going to play with a blaster rifle, you can go ahead and sell this for 120 as well. Now, obviously, this won't be the same value later on, so it's the same thing with certain weapons. If you don't intend on using certain things, go ahead and sell it. And that already gave me about 503 credits. Okay. Uh, this is an extra blaster pistol because I would say hold on to a couple of these blaster ones because you are going to get other party members and things like that. But there's a reason why I took off the cardio package. This is an implant. Okay, the value of this is worth about 400 credits. So if I decide to sell this to him, this would double what I basically already have. The other, if you go with a scoundrel, for example, or a soldier, you would not be able to accumulate this because they don't get implants for free. And whether you get a constitutional one, sometimes they'll give you a dexterity one, but usually the value early on right now is usually about 400 credits. So it's up to you if you want to sell it or not. Some people don't, some people do. It's up to you. But it is an option that if you want to make money, it is a way you can do it. And by selling that to them, I now have just about 903 credits. Some of you guys might have a little bit less, but depending on what you sold to them, but that's one way you can kind of do it. And after that, it just comes down to, okay, if there's anything else you want to buy, any extra med packs. I didn't sell much other than just getting two computer spikes, and I just sold the couple barber blades and things like that. And that's pretty much it. Now, if you want a little bit of a tip and some advice about buying stuff, guys, I'm going to be honest. Don't really buy anything from this guy right now. I mean, yeah, ultimately, he wants to sell you basically a an energy shield, but you don't have to buy this right now since you're going to get a lot of them when you go down to the lower city. So I would say hold off on those. Um, I would recommend at least grabbing at least a couple of concussion grenades if you plan on doing some of the battles in the battle arena. The reason why is because if you're a first timer, going through the battle arena, it can be a little bit challenging, somewhat, depending on what's what. And it doesn't matter what base class you go with, whether it's a soldier, a scout, or what I'm showing you right now, or a scoundrel in a sense, it's the same thing. You're still going to struggle your first time when you go through that battle arena. So it's usually, the first two fights are usually relatively simple, but after that, it's usually when you start getting a little bit more of a challenge and things like that. And I wouldn't recommend buying really any armor pieces from any right now because eventually you're going to get other armor stuff that's actually better than the stuff the stuff they sell most in these stores anyway. Um, some people tend to buy maybe like one piece if they decide to put it on a different party member or some other person, but a lot of times if you hold off on it, because for one, you already got a combat suit when you're on on the Endar Spire. So there's really no point to buying another piece of armor. Usually, when you go down to the lower city, there's a custom piece armor that's a light armor, basically just like this, but it has some upgrades that you could actually put on it that would actually make it a better overall piece of armor. But there's also another piece of armor in the lower city you could also get that is also has some upgrades as well that you could use. I tend to kind of grab those. So it depends on what's what. Most of everything else, I usually don't really grab that much in the store. It just depends on what I want. Now, that's that's pretty much all I could say as far as right down here. Now, I'm not done because let's go out here and I want to demonstrate a couple things. Well, since if those of you guys if you don't really care about doing some bounties, go ahead. If you're the type that don't really like to do them, well, I'm just kind of giving you some tips on how you can go about this. I would at least encourage you to at least do some of these battle arenas, even if you don't plan on doing Bendix Star Killer all the way. Okay, um, that's fine if you don't plan on doing him because yes, because it is a death match, it is technically you do get dark side points, but trust me, you do get a lot of credits for it, so that's the only thing. But this girl here, after you talk to her, she'll have some stuff that she can sell you as well. But usually, like the toilet back there, I usually don't really buy a whole lot from most of these vendors. It just depends. But you can always scroll down and see what they might have. If like, okay, in case you come back later on, things like that. Now, if you're the type that wants to help people, just think right down at the bottom. I'll only mention it just once. There is somebody down in the lower city that you could that basically has a bounty for them. This is where this particular thing, way down at the bottom, is going to become somewhat of a useful item. Uh, it's basically a Twi'lek. He's basically one of the few bounties that you come across. And basically, if you want to basically help the guy, you need to purchase this because by doing this, it'll set up. I can't remember how it all goes. I did it like maybe once or twice back in the day when I played this game, and I didn't exactly know what this thing was for when I originally purchased it. I thought it was for some. I thought it might have been for the big ranker thing that you get way down when you go down to the Undercity. Those of you guys know what I'm talking about. But turns out it was actually something that actually helped Matrix out instead. It was kind of interesting how that worked. But most of the time, to be quite honest with you, I usually take the two bounties between what is his name, Largo and Matrix. The reason why I take them is because they have things on them that I want. I don't really have a problem doing some dark side stuff, even if I do plan. Even though I tend to play more on the light side myself, I just can't go through this entire game not getting at least some credits because, well, like I mentioned, there's ways you can make money. Yes, it's possible. Now, obviously, if you go more of a dark side run, obviously you can get more money. Obviously, because then you can do pretty much everything that Terrace pretty much has to offer. Including even turning on Gadden, but most people don't really like to do that if they play light side. But here's another option that you can do. Another way that you can make money because that guy does have stuff that you could sell, basically, that it also help increase the money that you get for him, as well as the experience. Okay, but the reason why I'm also coming in here is because I mentioned about the bounties and things like that. So if you come in here, this is where you want to do the battle in the duel arena and things like that. Okay, so as soon as you get done with that, the battle arena pretty much opens up after you talk to this guy. I'll just cycle through. It doesn't really make a much lot of a difference. Now, at your current level, most of the time, you're only really going to be able to take on at least. I would I would say a first timer might struggle if they go with if they try to take on ball at this particular stage of the game. I could actually do it, but I'm only gonna just demonstrate at least two of these fights and give you an example. But this is another way that you can basically make money. Uh, you basically start out with Deadeye Duncan. A lot of people pick with this guy, but I kind of find the guy. I find the guy's name kind of funny a little bit. I don't know. It does kind of make you wonder why they called him that. Is it because he loses, or is it some other reason that he loses? I have no idea. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting how it works anyway with him. I don't know. That's pretty much all you need to do. And, you just come in, eventually you go through all the rest, and it's pretty much smooth sailing after that. Each time you do one of these, if you haven't tried the battle arena yet, those of you that happen to be new, give it a shot because you do get credits out of it, but you also get experience as well. It's usually very little when it starts out, but eventually you start racking up money, and it just kind of goes from there. That's pretty much all you really got to do. Now, I will give some pointers whether you're new or not. Uh, I do not recommend taking on this guy. Yeah, even if you do happen to be a level 3 right now, at your current level, it doesn't matter what base class you have, you are going to struggle with moral. Whether you're a soldier, a scout, or it doesn't matter what it is. This guy will give you hell. The funny thing about I actually find this guy to be more of a challenge than Bedneck. Yeah, literally. If some of you guys know what I'm talking about, Bedneck isn't really that hard. The only challenge about Bedneck you have to watch out for is the fact that he'll throw grenades at you. But if you keep out of if you don't get up too close to him and he stays away from you, you can just pretty much fire grenades at him and pretty much take him out. He's really just that simple. Marl's a different kind of animal though because he doesn't use a ranged weapon, so he gets up close and personal. So a lot of times it's now some people say that with a soldier that you can't do it because they have a higher health pool. Yeah, it's possible, but I wouldn't go any less than level 4, even with a soldier. I mean, yeah, I could probably do it. I've actually beaten Morrow a couple times, even with a scout, but I could not beat Morrow with a level 3 scoundrel. I just couldn't do it. I tried. I even tried to put the reflex all the way to max one time just to see if I could, it did nothing. I put in the dexterity all the way to 18 and put in some blasters and in their hands, I even gave them cars and a couple things like that, and it didn't make a difference. But there is ways you can beat Morrow. It's just not something right now that I would recommend. But you could basically do Deadeye, and then you could do Gurlon. And those, if you do manage to get by him, you can go ahead and try to take on Ice if you think you can do her. She can somewhat be a little bit challenging for new players, but she is beatable though. Usually the trick with her is really all you need to do. That's why I mentioned about grabbing a couple of concussion grenades, because you can easily stun her and just pretty much take her out that quick, and it's really not really that big a deal. She usually just sits back and uses her blaster. Borrow, like I said, you don't really to be able to throw grenades at him, he would have to stop moving, and he just doesn't do that. So, yeah, I don't know. Other than that, that's pretty much all I could say. As far as how to make money, there's really no other way that you could really do it when you think about it. I've tried, other ways to see if I could come up with ways that I could make money in the past, but that's really the best way that I could show. Even just by beating Duncan, I haven't even gotten to. I didn't even do Gurlon and Ice yet, and I just have just a little over 1,000 credits. Now, this isn't really a whole lot, but look at it this way: it's something, and if you want another tip, just try not to spend all your money on things that you're absolutely not going to want. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you tried to hold on to money. You want to buy look at it this way, guys. By the time you get down to the Undercity, you're going to have some money, a little bit. I think the Arcadia pistols, I think it's like 740 some odd credits, whatever it is. I don't remember exactly, but it's not cheap. I know that. But it is possible to buy it as long as you don't really spend things to what I mentioned. But that was also the reason why I pulled out the Scout which is a separate playthrough that I'm just kind of doing on my own. But it's just kind of an example that you guys can kind of do. It's up to you guys how you want to go about it. But there is ways that you can make money, as I said. You don't necessarily have to do all dark things in the game just to make money. Yes, you can make more, but there is ways of doing it. So other than that, guys, that's pretty much all I have for this video. So you guys can chime in your own thoughts, comments, things like that. Do you guys know about selling those? Or is there anything I could have explained better? I don't know. But that's basically the best approach that I could do. I mentioned about computer spikes. You don't have to sell them all, just sell a couple, I would say. Usually I only sell like maybe one or two. And then, because like I mentioned, later on in the game, if you decide to sell them then, they won't nearly be the same value that they were. So it's kind of like, if you're gonna try to make any kind of money, that's the only thing that I can kind of think of early on. So, other than that, guys, yeah. So just add your own thoughts either way. So there'll be more tutorial type tip videos coming in the future. So stay tuned for more different stuff. This one just happens to do with how to make money early. So there you go. That's one way of doing it. He's like, well, what about as a soldier? Uh, you could make similar kind of money that with a soldier and scoundrel. Because that I did pick a scout, because I sold that piece, it did give me a little bit. It gave me 400 extra credits normally. So depending on how much you got on the Endar Spire, playing as one of them, you could possibly get close to what I have right now. Obviously, if you end up doing at least 3 of the competitors in here, you might get a little bit more than what I have. But I'm just showing as a demonstration. But I only fought Marl. I only fought Deadeye Duncan, I should say, and that only gave me 100 credits. And beating him only gave me 100 credits, and I have just a little over 1,000. So obviously, if I go and do Gurlon and then Ice, because Gurlon is worth 200 credits and Ice is worth 300. So you gotta, figure, do the math. That's gonna add more on top of it. And if you do happen to somehow be able to get past Ball, he's at least 400 credits as far as I'm aware. But like I mentioned, he's not really somebody I recommend, for first timers or somebody early on. There is ways of getting by Marl, but I will say, even if you have played this game, he's pretty challenging. You really have to know what you're doing with Marl, though, because to prepare for him, if you decide to take him out early rather than wait later, because the game kind of recommends only do the first 3 competitors before you do Marl, because the game tells you, to basically, the way that the game kind of lays it out is, if you want to do the battle arenas, it's suggested to do at least the first 3, and then eventually after you complete a certain amount of plot down in the lower city and the undercity, that's when you can kind of go ahead and see if you can try to advance yourself a little bit in the tournament. Because to be quite honest, I'll give you guys a little bit of a tip, the way that I go about it. That's usually what I do the first time. Even if I know I can get by tomorrow, I usually play it on the safe side myself, and just go ahead and just take care of Ice, and then come back, and then I do all the way to that, to where I can set up Bendak, and then eventually I come back and beat him when the time allows for it. So I don't usually do him until it's time for me to leave Terrace. Usually, I don't know. It depends on what's what. Usually, some people say the best time to do Bendak is, you want to set him up before you go to the Sith base, and then once you come back from the Sith base, that's usually when people usually go to get him. But I don't usually do that. I actually take care of him earlier. Usually, if I'm doing a playthrough up here, I might not do that, because people are going to want to see people constantly going back and forth when they watch a main series on a YouTube. But if I play it on my own time, I don't really have a problem doing that, because usually once I get done with the Black Poker base, that's when I usually go right back up go back up to upper terrace or whatever, and then that's usually when I go through the rest of the competitors, and then all the way to Bendeck. Usually, once you get to him, I usually go back to the hut to set up the match, and then I come back, and then that's usually when I do it again, because you're gonna run into Canderous eventually at some point, because getting Bacilla back and all that kind of stuff. So a bunch of different stuff kind of plays out. So other than that, I don't really have anything else to say for it. So if you guys want to add anything else, you guys can. But that's pretty much the only advice I could really say. Um, Other than that, you're not really gonna make a whole lot of money when you're on Terrace anyway. And now I understand why some people want to try to make some money early if they play light side, because when you leave, by the time some people do get to leave Terrace, when you get to Dantooine, there are some weapons there that is kind of nice to buy, and a lot of them do cost quite a bit of credits. But to be quite honest, guys, um, I'm only saying this for people that play the game. You eventually can come back to Dentooine anytime you want. Some people are kind of afraid, that if they, well, here's the thing, guys. This is only just a minor spoiler. After you complete the first two planets, after you leave Dentooine, usually it depends on how many times you actually left the planet. Like okay, let's say you started with Kashyyyk, for example, and then let's say okay, you went to Manon right after. Well, let's say you left Kashyyyk before, let's say okay, um, like if you wanted to deal with Mission's brother, for example, over on Tatooine or something like that, the game will automatically register you as leaving and go into another planet, even if you don't decide, even if you're not intending on conquering, not intended on getting one of the star maps right away. The game will automatically register. I don't know why it's like that. It just kind of does. At that particular point, you'll get pulled onto the main Sith warship, and then that's where things are gonna get into a little bit of a trick, because then you won't be able to go back to Dantooine. So all you really need to know is that as long as you did complete two planets, you're fine. You can go back to Dantooine anytime you want. But usually, if you completed at least two planets, that's where things can get a little bit tricky. But as long as it's just one, let's say okay, you just want to visit them, and you did a couple of things to come back to Dantooine. You want to pick up some weapons, then you can kind of do that if you want to do that. But I wouldn't really, because if you leave Dantooine anyway, you go to Kashyyyk, you're more likely going to pick up some extra weapons from there anyway. That's really going to trump whatever the weapons you were planning on buying from Dantooine. But I get it, though. I'm the type that likes to buy a lot of different stuff, too. But it depends. Are you the type that's going to give your companions that? Are you going to use those weapons yourself? That's the thing you have to ask yourself, that question. I don't know. You know, after playing this game after so long now, I only end up buying things that I for sure I'm gonna have my character at least use, because if I don't know. It just depends on what's what. Once I give my companions a weapon or whatever weapon it is, I usually rarely ever change whatever they have. So it just depends on this. Uh, with Zalbar, for Zalbar, for example, I usually give him the Baka sword that when you go to Kashyyyk. Some people actually like to keep that for themselves. It just depends. I actually give it to him because I don't really feel the need for it once you become a Jedi. So it's not really much of a. Uh, I mean, it can be somewhat handy to have if you do it two weapon fighting, for example. But you'd be surprised what Zalbar can do with a sword in his hands with the strength that he has. So it's like if you guys ever take Zalbar with you guys on certain missions, man, oh man, a lot of times the enemies can't help but focus on him, which allows you to go in and get additional free hits on people that aren't paying attention to you at the time, because he really is that much of a he I don't know, he commands a certain amount of attention. So it's kind of like if you have him in a party with you, a lot of enemies tend to target him. I kind of notice, especially if you put a melee weapon in his hands. So it's just kind of interesting on that. But most of everybody else, I just usually leave the way they are. Cars usually by the time I need Dentween, I don't, the I feel that Bendix Blaster only is good up to a certain point. After that particular point, there's really not much of a not that much of a difference from other range weapons that you find in the game. Even the Arcadian pistol, while it is a pretty good pistol, it's not necessarily good against energy shields unless if you have I tend to prefer weapons that have more that allow for certain types of upgrades because then it can give you like um, the certain special abilities that allow you to basically take down enemy shields with a blaster. Because some of the ones like Mendex Blaster, for example, doesn't have that option. It is a good blaster, don't get me wrong, but I feel that it kind of loses its appeal a little bit once you get past once you start getting a little outside of Dantooine and other places like things like that. So I don't know. Other than that, guys, because I'm just kind of talking a little bit too long at this particular point. This video should not even have went this long, but that's the thing. When I talk about Star Wars or games like this, I tend to talk a little too long than I intend. So, but anyway, so you guys know anyway, as far as how to make money now, there's really no right or wrong way. I just gave you guys some examples, so it's really up to you at the end of the day how you want to go about it. But if you want to make quick money early on, the scout is your best bet to deal with, but you can use other classes. You can go and also with a soldier or a scoundrel. You just it just might have just a little bit less money, but that's about it. Other than that, it's all up to you guys. So with that, guys, have a good one.